Bless you.
I don't know what happened this year specifically. Something changed in my biology to where I have never experienced this in my life until this year. I feel heavy emptiness in my stomach before I have to suddenly aggressively sneeze. As if I feel something here that makes me suddenly feel really hungry, or like I have like a stomach ache, and then all of a sudden I'm like, it starts rising up to my nose, and then I have to fucking sneeze. Never experienced that before in my life. Imagine like just feeling hungry all of a sudden, just complete emptiness here, and then all of a sudden, fuck my nose. If I sneeze, I'll feel better. And then the moment I sneeze, the stomach thing is gone. I don't know where that came from.
Maybe you're just really aware of your sneeze center.
Aggressively intermittent fasting or something, or I just feel like this year maybe like allergic reactions to things have taken a bit. I mean, we change as we get older.
Sure.
Our biology drastically changes. One thing I didn't know until, I had I went into anaphylactic shock, end of 2020, had to go to the hospital, and I didn't know that something like a tree nut allergy, they get worse as you get older. So if you're a kid and you have a nut allergy or something like that, it's not something that gets progressively better as you get older, like you grow out of it. You actually, you go from being able to like kind of maybe survive it to if you have, like if you're young and it happens a few times and then a big chunk of time passes, if it happens to you as an adult, you increase your likelihood of fatality. And then the next time it happens, because it happened again, then it's like guaranteed. Like they said, look, if this happens again, it's going to be worse than this time. Yeah. And it'll probably just kill you. And I was like, great.
Well, and part of that is because you are actively avoiding all that stuff. True. You know what I mean? From a young age, you're like, as soon as they identify it, they're like, don't ever have tree nuts. And you're like, okay.
Well, then you're just weakening your immune system.
You're weakening your immune system to it, but you're also like, every time they tell you, like, if this happens, 2 or 3 times, like, then you're dead. You know what I mean? They're just pounding into your brain. Like, so then you're believing, you have the choice to like either believe them wholeheartedly because they're professional, or, just to be wholeheartedly against that. And you still have in the back of your mind that somebody told you, this is going to get worse every time.
You're going to get, it's like a reverse placebo effect of like being terrified the vacuum cleaner is going to kill you. And then ends up one day you just walking towards the stairs, not paying attention, and the vacuum cleaner's there and the cord gets wrapped around your ankle and you fall down the stairs. Who was right? The vacuum cleaner just sitting there, or you preemptively?
Yeah. Did you make that happen to yourself?
You consciously were going towards the stairs, but your unconscious programmed body was like, oh, hey, look, there's the vacuum. Weren't we planning on killing ourselves with that? So it doesn't know the difference.
Haven't we been thinking about that every night for years?
Like, right. So it knows is like, it found the thing. It's like, well, I mean, you kept seeing it in your head long enough. Yeah. This seems like a good idea to the body.
And then the scene just plays itself out.
Right. The person driving the body's like, wait, no, this isn't what I wanted. Are you sure? You think about it enough. So yeah, I this is one of those things where I don't know how much is like conscious effort thinking about something enough, and then it's manifest destiny, or is the body just changing as it gets older, and there's things that just start popping up. The other thing is this is if we're going to get into AI a little bit, this is that prompting thing of that little side tangent. I think one of the benefits of the internet and that kind of connective tissue is you actually can find diagnoses and connective tissue a lot faster, especially through things like Reddit, where you'll go and do a deep dive and go, hey, I've got this problem I'm dealing with. And then you find a whole slew of people who are going through the same thing, and they explain it and express it the same way, or they bring up their own challenges. And then some people are ballsy enough to just lay it all out on the table and go, oh, hell yeah, and this is something else that happens. And then more people feel more comfortable as the community grows online. You feel less lonely and go, oh, okay, there's nothing wrong with me. And if we get out of the mindset of living in the past or, obsessing over the future and just being in the present moment and realizing this quite literally is all anybody has, nobody has anything figured out, then you start kind of like your autonomic nervous system just settles down when it realizes it's not alone. It's not like loneliness in perceived challenges or perceived pitfalls and things like that. Your body immediately starts to, like, I'm talking about like the survival body, just the animal body starts to perceive that separation as that loneliness as, oh shit, I need to be in survival mode because I feel alone in whatever this issue, this compulsion, this addiction, this whatever this thing is, I feel alone in it. And because it's something of myself that I don't like, I feel I'm trying to reject this part of myself because I'm afraid of other people rejecting it in me. And then when you go and you do that deep dive, you find like, oh no, these are all just a bunch of human. I'm part of a section of humans that all have this issue too, but we're all just learning how to survive, cope, and coexist with this. The greater that number increases and you realize you're not as alone as you thought you were, that's a part of the healing process too, because then you're like, okay, this isn't just me. This is something we seem to have a proclivity for.
Right.
Misery, if that ends up being the thing, or depression or addiction or whatever. Misery tends to love company, but there's a strength in numbers element too. It's not just, hey, following the crowd will get you nowhere. Sometimes that conversation has to get started so we can start going, okay, if we all feel this way, what do you do when you're in a funk? Let's share our notes. Let's talk about this because, nobody likes feeling like this. So let's figure out what we need to do to change this. Now, the internet is also great for that and this connective tissue in sharing what works too. It isn't always just about, hey, I have an affliction and it's making me miserable and I don't want to feel so alone. How can we help each other? It's also sharing those tips and tools of like, hey, this really makes me happy. Makes me so happy. I got to share it with you and I'd like you to, and then if you're somebody who has either gone through a traumatic event or you're just lost and you don't have a direction or an angle to go, or you're seeking to find purpose, that's another one of those things to where you can go, okay, well, here are all the things I feel like are challenging me and that I feel like are afflictions and all those things. Let's find the community of people who are looking for help. But if you don't have a direction, there's also a good community of people who are like, well, bring out the little scientist in yourself and let's do some experimentation. What gives you a good rise? What gives you that little dopamine peak or spike rather? And when that does hit, then it's coming down to the other aspect of being a scientist, which is repetition. You want to get a repeat in the results. So you experiment. You create the hypothesis. You compile all the data and research, and you test it against this thing. And if you get a result, then you go, okay, cool. Is that a repeatable process? That's also part of art too. Is like if I go out and I have this experience or I do this thing and I'm really excited about it and it gives me a huge, spike in dopamine. I feel like I got purpose and intent and a drive to go chase this thing again. Then the scientist comes in and you go and you try to replicate that through experimentation. Do I get a big enough high as I did last time? And if you don't, then you go, okay, so how do I increase the measures of this so I can get the high again? And if I don't, then I look at the thing and go, why did I get it the first time? But then you try again and again and again and again. You throw in different information, different data, different trial and error things. Now you're no longer an artist. You're a scientist trying to conduct all these experiments to replicate, an outcome. And to anybody who's watching that on the sidelines, they're like, "Oh, it's an artist. Look at them go. Look at them they're just making art." And it makes me feel stimulated just watching them. And that person's not an artist. They're a lunatic who's just going again and again and again and again. They're insane. They're literally doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, which is the different result isn't, hey, I'm going to go try to make an apple and expect it to be an orange. That's not what I mean by a different result. It means I went and I produced an apple the first time and it felt like cocaine. But the next time I produced the apple, I don't get as much of a high, but it's the same thing. So why did I not get the same high? Well, is it the thrill of doing it for the first time? Is it the discovery aspect? Like, there's all these different elements. So then the artist goes, okay, well, I'm going to bring in more information, more data, more things like this. I'm going to, more trial and error. That's why you get different generations. Like, an artist will come up with a potted plant or just this inanimate object, and they'll grow it again and again and again and again. And you'll see different generations and different iterations, but they're still making the same pot and they're still not satisfied with it. Why is it not the perfect pot? Was the first one, if you look at the first one, it frankly looks like a piece of shit, but there's something organic and raw about it. You can tell they were just making this thing purely in the moment. But then if you look at the rest of them, they've perfected it. Each one gets better and better, and it looks more pristine and more perfect. And then it's flawless. And you're like, wow, they're doing that without even thinking about it. Look at it. It's just, they're not even there. But the artists themselves, the person doing it, is completely unsatisfied. They've met perfection, but to them, this is the ironic thing. They have now created a thing that it almost looked like a machine made it, because they're such a master at their craft. They do it without even thinking about it. But for the person who's looking at that and going, holy shit, what you just made it's pristine. There isn't a flaw in it. But to the person who made the thing, it's driving them fucking nuts, because they've made this perfect thing, and to them, all they're trying to do is recapture the feeling they got from making the first one. And if you look at the first one, objectively, subjectively, you look at it, and it frankly looks like a toddler made it. But the energy that went into it, even a bystander looking at it, even though it doesn't look as pristine or as perfect as the one that's a 200, versions later, they'll still look at the organic and raw version and feel the energy that went into that, the raw quality, the person who was in the moment, and they made this thing that was flawed. But that's why it's so cool. It is flawed. Eventually you'll go down, and can a machine make something perfectly? Yeah, but what energy and intent was put into that? Is the machine frustrated by the fact that it looks perfect and it is perfect, but it doesn't elicit an emotional response? That's the thing. It's like, something can be so pristine and perfect, but at some point, if it loses the intention or the energy or the struggle in its creation, then it's just vapid. It's just a thing. But pouring that energy and that frustration into what you're doing is part of what gives it its aura, its energy, because energy was put into it. So as we keep doing that process, it's weird to kind of observe that and experience that, because it really is all subjective. To one person, it's fucking madness. To the other person, it's music. So finding that separation in what you're doing is the key thing. I think can you find something you can give yourself permission enough to lose yourself in it without it becoming so self-destructive that it then ends up becoming destructive to other people or your environment outside of that, Then it's no longer art. Then it's just, well, like I said, then it's just madness. It's not giving any value to you, and then it's not giving any value to anybody else outside of that. It's just destructive. And sometimes you can see art do that. It can start as something that teeters on that line. It's kind of like Batman, where I have that one rule. I'm not going to cross that line, because the moment I do, I'm just like the people I'm putting away. And the whole actual intent behind Batman's entire mission is actually rehabilitation. That's why he, despite the Joker killing as many times as he does, still throws him back on Arkham, because there might be that 1% chance that something could get through to him that could make him make a different choice. And that's one of those things to where how much do you let this thing you're obsessing over, this addiction or this compulsion, become such a driving force in your life that it does destroy everything else around you. Then is it art? No, it's more like a kind of like a parasite. It wants life, because art wants life. Everything that you're creating, it wants your energy. It wants to be alive. In order to do that, it needs something as a facilitator. But if the art ends up sucking out more than it gives, you have a parasite. You have a living thing that is only in existence because it is sucking the life out of other things in order to keep its own existence afloat. And that's where I feel like your ego almost like separates itself from your body as almost like this like evil entity that inhabits the craft that you're doing and says, yes, give more energy to me. I'm the ego. I want. And it's actually separated itself from you and lives and coexists in this stuff that you're working on to a degree where you lose yourself so much into that thing, it becomes your identity and you lose yourself. Versus, frankly, that craft or that art, that thing you were working on, that's meant to be a facilitator to get energy out. And then anybody who's looking at it can subjectively call it art. But the process itself it's just thermodynamics. It's energy in, energy out, tension here, compress it here and you get a lot of flow here, let it flow really freely and you get a kind of a slow movement here. It's just figuring out what makes yourself tick, but being aware of it enough to not lose yourself completely to the thing. So then that is your identity. Make your art, do your craft, use it as an outlet, not as the thing that you just solely become.
Well, I agree with you for the most part, but I do think that there are some great artists who, they found a certain character or a certain thing and became that and then became well known for it and were excellent at it.
They did, but it made them miserable. And some of the people that you can really find who are like that.
Some of them have been very miserable.
Jim Carrey is one of those people who really, he was way up there. But one of the things he found was like that exactly as I'm talking about is you lose yourself to all of these different things in this pedestal that people kind of put you on as you're doing it. But deep down, you start losing, all these pieces of who you are at your core. And frankly, I mean, if you look at Jim Carrey as one of those people, he is, when he goes and he performs his characters, there it is. There's the craft. But then if you look at who he is outside of that, he found himself. And it wasn't in all of these characters or things like that. Jim Carrey, as he talks now, is this very calm, eloquent, mild-mannered. I mean, he's a painter. He's just focusing on trying to be in the present moment and not run from it anymore. And also living, in a lot of characters like that myself personally. All of those characters, all of those things, they're the bigger you are, the greater the applause, the more you feel validated and less rejected. But then again, you're not being you. Your energy that you're putting into the thing is you. But people start identifying you with all these other things that they're not you. They're characters. That's great. I'm glad it gives you entertainment. It gives you, energy and stuff like that. But at some point in that, I need to step away and be allowed to just be myself, who is a human that feels, cries, has failures, setbacks, things like that. And if you position yourself in the spotlight so much to where you're not allowed to do that and you have to always be on your A game, then yeah, something gets lost there. You're no longer a human. You're just a product, something that is meant to be consumed. And the more people I find in a period of life, the one pattern I find is they're all on that gravy train ride of like you're really high on that, and then eventually it loses its flavor. It becomes stale, and you realize you're just kind of this empty catalyst for other people's enjoyment. But where are you in the mix of all of that? Somehow you got lost in that. And that's where I say, have your craft allow it to have value for you as a source of channeling your energy, and let it have value for other people. But the moment it becomes play monkey play, do the thing, then all the intention of what you were doing in the first place, that first pot that I was talking about, the one that looks like a toddler made it but still has all the energy there, something happens where, you look at, I bring Jim Carrey up again as somebody who, there's that energy on SNL. And then gradually over time, big Hollywood just starts becoming very distasteful when you realize it had nothing actually ever to do about you, your talent, and what you were producing. It had 100% into this person is hungry enough that they're desperate. That means they will exhaust themselves through burnout. And because we're Hollywood, we really don't care. You're just one in many numbers. And because you're terrified of losing that, that means you can be easily coerced because you're like everybody else in Hollywood. You don't want to lose this power. It's status, and it's also, it's the Hollywood elite. It's the club, So fear is really the thing that's keeping you wound tight and even doing your thing. So it has nothing to do with being an outlet or your craft anymore. It's a byproduct of fear. And the harder I play and the more I burn myself out and the more I do this and the, more clicks and likes and all that stuff I get, I'll at least be safe. I'll be safe from rejection. I'll be safe from being lost out in the elements and all that stuff. And the more you start packing all that on, eventually what ends up happening is you look and you go, I'm not happy at all. And this is all I felt like I wanted, but I was operating out of a place of panic and fear, not one of I'm enjoying this and the chase is exciting and I feel like I'm giving. At first I was told, you're doing such a good job. Look at how much you're giving, and how how that's reciprocated. But it's not being reciprocated. It's yes, give. I want. And then you just become the facilitator for that. And over time, you just, the human body can only meet a particular threshold of that. And then you just become so exhausted, you're like, why am I even doing this? Robin Williams is kind of one of those. It's just, I think part of his was drug use, and that affected his biology to a degree where he was just never able to come back. But the byproduct is also of putting so much energy into something like that chemically, at the end of the day, you're so exhausted, you have nothing left. And it does something to your not only your hardwiring, but also how you just perceive basic relationships. If you're given all that on stage and then you have nothing left for your personal relationships at the end of the day, that's also exhausting for the ones that you love the most, that you're close to, because then all they're doing is facilitating something for you.
Well, and throughout history, like there's been clowns and actors and stages and all these people that to some degree were going through this kind of thing that you're talking about. But more recently, within the past couple 100 years, we've got television and we've got everything else that goes along with that, like podcasts and radio and the internet and everything. But that opened it up to where those same people can just rise to fame to an extent that you never would have been able to before everything was so connected. And so that makes it, like, it just really changes things. Like before that, there were still actors who were like full of themselves or who became the character, and like that was what they were identified with. And, I'm sure some of those people really had to deal with that same kind of thing where they were like, at a certain point, they're like, this is not who I am. This is a character I played, and I need you all to understand that. And they probably had similar difficulties, but I think that was also progressive. It was on the way toward what we now have with people, dealing with being movie stars and things like that, or playing characters where they get completely just pigeonholed, I think is one of the words for it, but like into being that character, like Bobcat Goldthwait, he played that character on so many movies, and people they loved it, but then he would go into these situations where he was trying to just work out new material or just do different things, and people would just scream at him to do like that character. And I think it like just but like I guess my point was just that like in the last couple 100 years, it's become way, way more difficult to deal with all of that. And but again, a big part of it is the ability to rise to fame so quickly. And so that's something that as human beings, I don't think that even in a couple hundred years, we've really been able to adapt to or understand like how that power affects us. And then, so like to your point, people get to a certain age and then or a certain amount of time passes where they're identified as this thing. And to some degree, it's probably an artist feeling like I need to create a new thing. Like as you know, I play music, and there's an artist making something and then performing that or like showing that for a while. Eventually that person wants to do something else. They want to move on. And so like, I guess taking it back to music for a second, there's definitely been lots of situations that you've would have heard about where a musician will be playing something and then they'll create a new album and they'll bring it out and people will hate it. They'll be like, "What? Why is this not like the earlier stuff that you do?" Yeah, Bob Dylan, when he went electric, like it was a similar thing. But it's like, people, the audience becomes a part of your art, and then they become this thing where it's like it rejects what you did, and then you're like, hold on. We were in this together. Like you were supporting me because I'm me, not because I'm your monkey to play as you want me to. And then some people, it's interesting because some people fold. Some people are like, oh, let me make something more mainstream or that connects with the public better. And some people don't. Some people are like, no, I'm going to be myself. And, it's interesting how those people like diverge, because sometimes the person who folds, does go on to create some really amazing stuff that people do love. But it's a little harder to respect them than the artist who's like, no, I don't care. I don't care what you think. I'm going to continue to be awesome and do my thing. And like, but that also all comes with, a certain degree of, if you have the fuck you money, or, at least the ability to just continue on. Like, like whether or not you have a lot of money, like if you have the ability to sustain yourself, and which usually requires a certain amount of money. But
I think to go hand in hand with that, also, if you look with, I think kind of like one of the original, this kind of gives you just an example of just that awareness, like you were talking about, of how many people are kind of aware of you then versus now. The closest you could really get back then to, you being renowned across the land as being someone of status and performance. It had nothing to do with acting necessarily. I mean, it was acting kind of to a degree. It's just the performance would usually end in either life or death. But gladiators and gladiatorial combat, or even like being, a great gunslinger of the West, which is an art, you got to be good at that. The thing was, you even hear this in like, in Gladiator, are you not entertained? I love that line because it's right to the point of, back then, if you were a good gladiator, that was the ultimate performance that people would know across the land. But there was a catch-22 to that. Just because you were a good gladiator, your play monkey play meant you were just good at killing, but that meant you also, somebody was going to come along that their only goal was to kill you and become the next top gladiator, possibly win your freedom.
Yeah.
Gunslingers in the West too, that was that thing, that art of combat is, you might be really well known, but actually the more well known you are, the higher your risk is, and you have actually a less high opportunity or high statistic of living a long life. So where nowadays it almost feels the same way. The more well-renowned you are across the land, and the more people know your name, it isn't actually a good thing. It isn't like, look at, everybody knows who I am.
That just means there's more people that have an opinion about who you're supposed to be.
And also people who want what you got. So it means the more known you are, guess what? It just means the target on your back is bigger, and somebody's going to come for you. And the moment it's all Eye of the Tiger. It's all Rocky 3. The moment you lose that drive and whatever that animal, killer instinct is in you, there's going to be someone younger who wants it more and who's going to have what you used to have, which is that nothing's going to stop me. I'm going to get what I want.
Yeah, I kind of respect a government, like this might be an unpopular opinion, but
Right.
I kind of respect a government that is like, all right, so this is how we're going to deal with criminals. We're going to put these people in public in front of all of you and have them fight to the death. So, don't fuck up. And this is, this is our entertainment also. It's like, it's like, I don't think that I necessarily would have wanted to live in those times in those places, but it's interestingly inspiring to me that they were like, we're going to put this all right in front of you. They don't have to be secretive about like how they're oppressing you. They can just be like if you steal some stuff, we're going to, throw you in the gladiator ring.
Kind of an irony to that too, because if you make it like a particular prison sentence, which has a shelf life, unless it's a life sentence. But then again, if you're a gladiator, that kind of is a life. It can go one way or the other. It either is, it has a shelf life, and you earn your freedom and you combat X amount of bouts, or you have X amount of, fights or rounds, or you die, you die in the process. So it's a life sentence. So it's either you get out in 10 years with good behavior, essentially, which is you go in, you do the job, and then when you go back into the barracks, you just train, you eat, you do your thing, or you go out and, could be tomorrow, but you die. But from all of that, if you think about it, anybody who is going to earn their freedom after X amount of time as a gladiator, probably one thing that could be guaranteed, because you're literally fighting for your freedom. The one thing that probably can be guaranteed is that person we will have, if they were a killer or a criminal or anything like that, will have 100% probably been rehabilitated. Because it's not like if you go into prison where, there's a chance you might be killed or you just might get raped or, there's a whole slew of different things that can happen. You might actually just have a silver tongue and be articulate enough to talk your way out of most situations in prison. But the moment you get on the battlefield as a gladiator, that completely out the window. You can't talk your way out of a gladiator fight. It's just not going to happen. So because of that, when you get out, you're out. The only thing you're really looking for now in life is peace. If you get your freedom and you had to get up every single day and basically it was either you're going to die or you're going to fight tooth and nail and your goal is to eventually get out of there, then once you're out of, quote, prison, then all you want is peace. You don't want to pick up a blade ever again. You're definitely not going to do anything that landed you there in the first place. And if you're not of that mindset of you just want to get out, well, then the pits are also some place where you intend on dying. You don't want your freedom. Actually, your freedom is death. So you're kind of in the place you want to be. So it means that if you get out, then you're guaranteed to be rehabilitated. You're not going to do anything that's going to get you landed back there. And you're probably going to be seeking a more quiet, peaceful life. Versus if you're the opposite of that, you're probably looking for a life sentence, which means you want to die in there because you're exactly where you want to be. But
if they get out, they're essentially like a UFC fighter where, people are looking at them like they're renowned,
right.
As much as you could be at the time.
But there's always still going to be that lunatic who still sees an ex-UFC fighter and wants to pick a fight in the street.
Sure.
Because they're it's just the same thing as, sorry, but picking a fight with like Mike Tyson. Unfortunately, that didn't go as we all hoped it would, but it's still one of those things that, I don't care how the fight went down on pay-per-view. I'm still not going to try to pick a fight with Mike Tyson on the street. It's just not going to happen. So one thing is, again, entertainment and for show, and it's going to go down one way, but the realism is that there's always going to be some nut that is going to see taking out someone who is of notoriety as a way of getting notoriety themselves. I mean, look at the guy who, the guy who murdered John Lennon was actually trying to get the attention of Jodie Foster. I think
I've heard that before.
I gotta look that up, but I'm pretty sure, it was just one of these things where the guy was like, I want the attention of Jodie Foster. What can I do that will be big enough to get her attention? And
that's crazy.
The thing is, to this day, I don't have any idea if Jodie Foster was even a fan of the Beatles or anything that John Lennon did, or like.
Who was the guy that killed John Lennon?
I'm gonna look this up real quick. But that's one of those things to where the bigger you get, Vision said it really well in Civil War. Strength invites challenge. And the greater that strength becomes, the more people want to come and kind of usurp that power. They're like, hell no, I'll be damned if there's going to be anybody who's bigger than me. I don't answer to anyone. And then all of these things arise to that challenge, like Doctor Doom and Thanos and Ultron and these things that see it as in their own minds, they're able to give reason to this madness by saying, no, this I can make this make sense. I can make this make sense. It sounds like a good enough idea now. I got to stick with it.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. The guy who killed John Lennon. Oh, that was fast. A lot of Johns, and they knew who I was talking about quickly. Mark David Chapman, an American Beatles fan. Oh, so the man who shot John Lennon was
a Beatles fan.
A profound or a renowned Beatles fan among people. Shot and killed John Lennon outside his Manhattan apartment building on December 8th, 1980. Chapman fired 5 shots from a .38 special revolver, hitting Lennon 4 times in the back. Lennon was pronounced dead on a... Yes, but why?
Jodie Foster was stated to be very impressed. But yeah, what a bizarre thing to to do to try to impress somebody.
So interesting. That may have been someone else. I got to double check this. I mean, that may...
Fake news.
Here's the interesting. That has been something that I have been told, for years. That was always I'm going to also see if that was this guy or if it was somebody else who got assassinated for that reason. It could have been like Reagan's attempted assassination could have been that reason. I may have things mixed up. American Beatle fan who was envious and enraged by Lennon's lifestyle was inspired by fictional character Holden Caulfield from J.D. Salinger's novel The Catcher in the Rye. A phony killer who loathes hypocrisy. So I guess this guy must have just been a fan of everything that John Lennon used to stand for. And then, I don't know, maybe in his relationship with Yoko Ono, which we know that... Have you recently seen the video of, like, I think it's like Chuck Berry and John Lennon are doing a song together, and Yoko Ono is kind of singing it, and
she starts wailing.
He's looking over to like, what the hell did you bring on my set?
Off.
What is? And yeah, that was that. Oh man, that was great. But that was one of those riffs. So I can imagine there are quite a few fans who, if the music went from sounding like something like, I don't know, like Lonely or Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, and some of the beautiful music that's in that, to then go to the caterwauling sounds that were coming from some of those records that the two of them did, then I get it. I can see exactly how an unstable fan would go, what? I feel extremely betrayed. So that creates a different, are you looking up to...
I want to figure out who was trying to impress Jodie Foster.
Yeah.
Because that's still more interesting to me. John Hinckley Jr., who attempted to assassinate President Ronald Reagan in 1981.
So that was the one. Okay, so I just got it mixed up. There are 2 different assassinations. Well, no, one succeeded, one did not.
So John Hinckley Jr. He was trying to gain her attention, driven by an obsession from watching her in the movie Taxi Driver, where she played a young prostitute. Hinckley developed an extreme infatuation, stalking her and believing this dramatic act would make her love him, mimicking the film's themes and character Travis Bickle's quest for notoriety.
Wow. You know what? See, now here's the thing is that the political assassination felt like it had, like, would have made more sense and, like, had better standing grounding, sort of, you know, ground to stand on as far as motive. But I'll forgive me for saying this, but at least the guy who shot John Lennon, he sounded like he actually had perfect motive. You know, what the hell? I've been listening to your music since I was a kid, and this sounds like shit now. This is terrible.
I mean, that's, I got to be honest, that's a little weak. Like,
it is.
We were just talking about a band, like an artist, like making something and then changing it, and then the audience rejecting it. And so you just said the same thing to justify that.
And it is pretty weak and ridiculous, but at the same time, here we stand. You got, I don't know. I thought maybe the reason why I would have thought that would have gone hand in hand with, you know, John Lennon and just some nut going, I'm going to impress Jodie Foster, is just because of the nature of the people involved versus Ronald Reagan. You would have thought that would immediately had to do with something that was conspiracy based or this or that, and it ends up that was the one who was just...
This is a pretty weird one for whoever, though.
You know,
like that.
Then again, Ronald Reagan was a movie star before.
Yeah,
a politician,
I was just thinking about that too. I wonder how might have played into it.
Yeah, because a lot of people were fans of him in that context long before.
Well, because we only think of him as the president because, like, that's the context we think of him in. But I wonder, like you're saying, if at the time there was some connection between Ronald Reagan and Jodie Foster, or, like, you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing is that I mean, it's Hollywood is Hollywood.
Yeah, but that person who tried to assassinate Ronald Reagan might have legitimately thought, like, this will be like a building block.
Fuck him as president. I'm gonna kill Ronald Reagan, the actor. You know, and then because you hear that in a lot of movies that we watch now too, where you'll. There's so many, films that Back to the Future was one of them that I just watched recently where somebody made the comment like, who's the president? It's Ronald Reagan, the actor, so you'll see that in movies and stuff where they all go, what the hell are you talking about? The actor's playing, is the president of the United States. Who are they going to get next? The Bugs Bunny or like that? That's kind of the running joke. And to people these days, it's just either if you're on the right, he's, the savior of the right. If you're on the left, he's, this maniacal warmonger. And if you were just kind of right in the center, you're just kind of...
honestly, I don't try to portray myself as a person who understands the way that the different political leaning people identify. You know what I mean? It's interesting to bring that back around to like pronouns and whatnot, but that's essentially what it feels like is there's all these different people who don't know really where they're politically aligned, and so they've started to identify as something or another, or more often than not, they've started to point fingers at other people and try to, from a third party, identify those people as one thing or another. And I don't have the time, or the patience to look into all of that enough to really understand enough to comment on it. But I do think that it's nonsense. You know what I mean? I think there's a lot of people who are just scared and angry and, kind of to some of the things we were talking about earlier. I think people just need to communicate with each other directly more and be a community and take care of each other. And, it's like... one of the things about politics is it's just basically like magic. You know what I mean? It's like you have this displayed version of these people talking to each other, which is kind of an act. And then you have behind the scenes things changing for the people. You know what I mean? It's just, it's this whole thing where like, it just makes me care less and less about the politics and the people who are politicians and even the things that they stand for. It's like, all right, I don't care what that person cares about. as much as I care about the traction that you can get on these things actually moving forward or changing or, being, better for the people or for the world. Like, if none of that is happening and you're just juggling like which person is the face of which group, like, I don't care. You know what I mean? It's a waste of our time and energy it's like backing a sports team that isn't doing anything for the public benefit. You know what I mean? It's like backing a sports team and then you never see them play, and they just get in front of you and talk about playing, and you're like, and that's maybe a stupid analogy, but it's, like that's where it gets me as far as like feeling or thinking things about politics. I'm just like, I don't want to put myself on this scale that somebody has created where it's like there's right wing and extreme right wing, and there's left wing and extreme left, and there's centrists, and like, I hear a lot of people that seem, this is all I'll say about it, is I think I've heard a lot of people that seem like they're pretty well thought out people say something along the lines of that they feel like they're kind of a centrist. And I think all of that really means to me is that it's kind of the way that we talk about mania sometimes, where it's like you could be way too excited and then way too depressed, and then you'll swing back and forth between those things because you continue to want to be way too excited, and then you get way too depressed as a result eventually. And so, that's the way that it feels about this political spectrum, or like the political support spectrum, is that people are starting to sound more and more reasonable, are starting to say things like they're centrist, because that spectrum is just too wide. And, a lot of rational people seem like they don't want to be labeled as an extremist on either direction. So it's like what we're doing is we're aiming back toward the center. Like, and what people are meaning by going toward the center is, let's be balanced about all of this. Like, obviously we can't solve everything overnight. Obviously there are going to be problems in the world. Like, instead of going to the extremes, and screaming, like when I hear going to the extremes, what I think is screaming at each other, and so like when we have extremists and then we have like visual representations of our, representatives screaming at each other, it's like, we're like, that's not accomplishing anything, is what it feels
mom
like.
And dad fighting. That's all you really do.
Well, and what I really see is children fighting. I don't see mom and dad fighting. Like, sometimes mom and dad fighting can be constructive, or they're going through something important. But when you see children fighting, and it's not even about anything real, you know what I mean? And then that's what it feels like the politicians are doing. It's like, it's just smoke and mirrors.
It depends on like where you sit in the vantage point and how. Or we're talking about mature parents, because I mean, from my own personal perspective, now looking back, it just seemed like it was actually two kids actually yelling at each other instead of two adults, and you just realize it's two kids yelling at each other, and they just somehow you ended up being in the middle of what their playtime was. So they decided they wanted to have playtime, had playtime. And usually in playtime, you build sandcastles, and I ended up being the sandcastle, and then they argued, and then that became two kids fighting over the sandcastle, and you're like the sandcastle just going, hey, hey guys, the tide's coming up. I'm about to get washed away here. What's going on? Sorry, a little side tangent, but it is one of those things to note that the reason I bring that up is you're making me want to do an episode eventually about so there is political science, but what makes a particular politician an artist in their craft? You know what I mean? Is it quality diplomacy? Is it a strong backbone where under duress and intense moments you can remain calm and calculative? Is it being a quality person of the people? And standing up for something and then backing up what you say through action. As we look throughout history, where politically, both in and mind you, kings and queens are still politicians. They're ambassadors of their territory and their land, and when they have to go and meet other kings and queens, we've seen how good negotiations and bad negotiations can go in different kingdoms throughout history. But again, that was still politics. So as we look in our past and we look in our current situation, we obviously know that there's a science to this, and we're just trying to replicate better times in history through application and study and practice, and take that political science and go, okay, look at through history, and during these bad times, how did our species succeed through those challenges and come out on top? And where were those pitfalls, and how do we not repeat negative points in history? And how do we observe us as a species and figure out where a rise and fall is based on also natural elements? And how do we, conduct ourselves, essentially? But throughout history, the same can be said as anybody doing their craft. Like, there's plenty of architects, there's plenty of painters, there's plenty of pianists, there are plenty of people who do all kinds of crafts, but some of them just go through the motions and they do their job. And you're like, hey, can you read sheet music and can you play the piano? Great, you can do it. You have a technical skill, right? But then there are some pianists who not only can they read the sheet music, that's fine, but when they play, they don't look at the music at all. It's bizarre. It's like they already knew the music at hand, and they just it's like when they touch the keys, it's like Venom and Eddie. They just become one thing that moves seamlessly, and you can tell as they move seamlessly that there are still arguments that were had in private, where you can hear them like bickering and arguing, stuff like that. But when it's time to play, they play together, and that's that pianist with that piano too, to where you can tell it wasn't always as seamless as it is right now. There are times where he's probably beating the shit out of that thing, like, piece of fucking shit. Why can't I get this piece of music down right? And the piano's just like, fuck you. I'm an inanimate object, but through all of that, any craft can either just be something you do, or it's something that you are just a master to a degree where without even thinking about it, the talent just pours out, but you still hone your craft and you do it, every single day, and you challenge yourself and you try to get better and better and better. But not necessarily because you're trying to be the best of the best. You're just trying to be the best version of you that you can and produce something good. But then that's how, like, sometimes people they want to be president. That's all they want to do. And they will fight tooth and nail to get it and convince everybody and try and build this big constituency of all these conglomerates and other people to back them. Versus a good leader usually doesn't want it. They're just trying to make a difference in the world, and they're just waking up every day, putting one foot in front of the other and hoping that they can make a difference in someone's life. And then because they don't want it and they're just trying to do their best, usually really what they want is to do the job and be at peace. But because of that, that's the person who has to lead. Well, that's a natural talent, and it's also, the art and craft of what you're doing. You commit to it.
Pretty much anybody who wants the power is not cut out for it. It's kind of the way I look at it. And so, like, unfortunately, what that means is that the people who are cut out for it don't want the power. Mm. And so it's difficult to get a really good leader in the position where they can lead, because you end up with, people who are maniacal, and want the dopamine of, everybody looking at them as the most powerful person in the United States, Yeah,
it's like, I don't want to be king. I just want to be a good king if I have to be king. It's not to want to be the king. It's to want to be a good person who, if I have to wear the crown, heavy is the head that wears the crown. But if I got to do it, all I want to be is a good person who's shouldering this responsibility in a way that my predecessors would be proud. If you weren't a good king before, you hope somebody better comes along. If you were a good king, you hope that your legacy is upheld by somebody who can look back and know what they need to, if things are just patterns and cycles and stuff like that, you can look in the past and go, well, when hard times were hard, this is how I want to be, because these are the men or women who, made a real difference and stood in front of the face of danger with courage and, managed to get everybody out safely. And these are the people who didn't. And I'm just going to work to not focus and fear, those outcomes, but rather just be mindful of them and know that if you aren't present, these things will happen. But again, this all comes down to somebody who has crafted this as an art and as a politician. There really is, there's, political science, and then there is the art of politics, the art of diplomacy, the art of understanding what needs to get done. And I think definitely there is an art to grace. I think one president who really did this well was George W. Bush. There's a lot of things within his presidency that were not popular decisions. They didn't go well. But through all of that, he exited the Oval Office gracefully. And in his past years, out of his presidency, has been trying to do things to kind of rectify some of that, and also has come out publicly and said, "I have made mistakes." Mm-hmm. One of the big ones. The room went quiet when this happened, but when he was, declaring that the war in the Middle East was a mistake, and the room just went silent before everybody, just standing ovation from both sides. Because it took a lot of courage to just admit you fucked up to that degree in front of all of your peers.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things to where in your time you do the best that you can, but out of that you don't just boast and brag and say, here's what we did and here's, all the things. It's like if there are mistakes made, sometimes you just got to make up for that. And I think Jimmy Carter was kind of a president who did that too. I think during his presidency, there were a lot of decisions that were made that I think he knew after the fact. Jimmy Carter was a phenomenal humanitarian, an incredible human being, but not one of our better presidents. I think he was somebody who was chosen for the job by the people because he was a person of the people. But when it came to certain policies and understanding, certain economic things,
wasn't appreciated very much.
Yeah. Versus some people, they do have that better rigid backbone and are better suited for certain positions in an executive place because they aren't liked, actually. But that's also a skill set. There's an art to that, too, is how can you be a good heel or a good, not necessarily villain, but one of those guys who's just like, I'm not here for you to like me. I'm here to get shit done. I'm here. There's a job that needs to get done. I don't care what anybody's going to say, and just kiss my ass. I got to be up at 6 a.m. and get this job done. So there's that kind of difference. At the end of the day, they might not be really the best person. If you look at some of the politicians throughout history too, a lot of them have been just assholes, or just, behind closed doors doing some pretty shady stuff that is, you don't want to come to the spotlight. JFK was one of those who was not really necessarily always the best man, but he was actually the best man for the job. As a president, he was phenomenal. He understood, human rights, but he also, what a hell of a job standing up against the Russians during that time, and the Cuban Missile Crisis. So, but you look at that, and that's one of those things. Good man, not necessarily. Best man for the job at the time? Yeah, we almost got eviscerated. So but there again, there is a very interesting art and craft to that.
Yeah, there's a balance to getting the right person, because it's not, you can't just like...
It's professional wrestling. Sorry, I got to say that, because it really is professional wrestling. You're either the hero or you're a heel. And both of those, you got to be good at it.
Well, but that's the Hollywood version of it. And like what we're talking about is that, you need a balance, and like you can't just profile a person and say this is this person. You know what I mean? And so they're going to be good or bad for this job. Like, sometimes it's right, and sometimes, that's completely wrong, and they seem like they might not be the right person for the job, but in practice, they are. So sometimes it's difficult to, I don't know, like it's always difficult to choose a leader, to choose somebody who's going to represent everybody. And so, a big part of the difficulty is just that the job is impossible. You know what I mean? And so you have, it's a figurehead job. It's a figurehead job with real power and real responsibility, but it's still a figurehead job. And so what that really means is that there's groups of people making a lot of decisions. And then when it comes down to, and that's probably one of the reasons that Trump is so successful at what he does, because what he wants to do is talk to people and get attention. And, and that's my opinion, but I also think it's pretty clear, like, that he wants to talk to people and wants to get attention and he wants to get people to like him in certain ways. And so there's also things he seems like he doesn't care about, but because that is what that part of the job is about, like, he's probably really suited for doing that, that thing. And I'm not saying he's my choice or, good for the people or good, I don't know what he's good for exactly, but he's not bad at acting that part.
At what he does. And then here's the ironic thing is that the people who hate him really the most, which is mostly, the Hollywood elite and like big Hollywood, what's hysterical about that is Trump is a sociopath. He was created by society, but the society that he was created by, ironically, is big Hollywood. This monster that they have in the White House now, as everyone's, kind of defining him as, that was created by Hollywood. Like all of his entire methodology and the way that he basically is able to just capture the spotlight in any moment, and his entire structure of how he operates, and which again is very, very WWE. It's very pro wrestling in that kind of I'm the heel, I'm the bully. Here I'm going to come in and I'm going to make a big fuss, and people are going to love to hate me. They're going to love to hate me. And the moment I'm gone, what was interesting? The moment Biden was in power, things got really boring. It's just people were like, as much as I hated Trump, I kind of miss him. Things were entertaining. Things were interesting. And that was something I heard a lot of people kind of remark on from time to time, and they'd hate saying it. And I'm like, well, here we go. We're in the entertainment industry. But
like,
where did he come from?
Do you want a good leader, or do you want to be entertained?
Exactly. And I'm
not necessarily also to clarify, I'm not saying Biden was a great leader. And part of that is me just not wanting to take sides, but like the one of the problems that I see is that it's not just either entertained or a great leader.
No, the other one was a panic strategy. It was just, let's get somebody in the office that isn't this guy fast as we can.
That wasn't that particular situation, but my point is that we don't just get one or the other. Like we could get an entertaining president, we could get a good president, but we also have the whole spectrum in the middle of there. And we could have an unentertaining president who isn't good for the people, who, doesn't make people laugh, and also, makes terrible decisions all the time. And
there have been plenty of those throughout history. Yeah. What's the one thing that just came out on Netflix? I was watching it. Michael Shannon plays, I gotta double check it again. But it's about basically one of those guys who just stands up, starts giving a speech, and he's just so upset about the state of everything that all of a sudden they're like, no, we want this guy for president. And he's like, wait, what? No. I came up here to say, that's why I think you should vote for this guy for president. And they're like, no, fuck him. We want you now. So he becomes president, and he's one of the other presidents that got assassinated. But it's a story that you've never really heard until it's brought to light. Mm-hmm. But the person who follows him is, again, one of those very meh presidents. I mean, he was a renowned bully and a drunk, and he was kind of a bouncer, essentially. And that's kind of one of those cases to where so much of the media and so much of what it as an entity sort of exists on, it's almost like the media kind of is a representation of the old Greek gods. You remember in Clash of the Titans that the gods start losing their power because people stop worshiping them, and because they're not their prayers are basically what give the gods strength. The moment we stop believing in them, they weaken, and the gods are essentially the barrier between us and the Titans, which are the primordial things that created the universe. But they're just chaos beings, weapons of mass destruction, essentially. And Hades is trying to unleash them because fear, which is all people have nowadays, is what fuels Hades, because he was cast out of Olympus. And all of this kind of sounds very
well. It's an interesting like viewpoint on like what we understand about science and how all of those things.
Yeah, you give your it's the slit experiment. You know, it's particle physics that particles technically operate as a wave form until you observe them, and then when you observe them, they actually they move in tension like a particle. So it's what? That doesn't even make sense. How can they be the same, both at the same time? But that's exactly kind of like now the media is, it has to stay relevant. It has to stay interesting, and it has to stay poignant, or at least as a mainstream media, like a big conglomerate or a big money machine. And if we had a perfect president, the news would have nothing to report on, because a good president, is usually taking care of things so quietly and so seamlessly that there's really nothing to report on here on the home front. You got to report on things out there. And if you just tell a bunch of good news, nobody's really that interested. We want conflict, and we're stimulated by, danger. Because the moment danger is afoot, then we're like, oh, I'm awake, I'm alert. That's why we actually crave bad news. If we have good news and we're at peace, then we're not stimulated enough to go out and explore, go out and find things, or go out and find chat. Because here's the thing, if your body feels like it's in danger, and all you're getting is just bad news, which keeps you stimulated like you're in danger, then you actually feel more proactive and more, what's the word I'm looking? More motivated to actually go out and learn new skills. And when you're learning new skills, your ego feels satisfied because it feels like it's getting stronger and better. So that's what the hack is. The news learned that if we can just feed people bad news all the time, it means they'll always feel stimulated, and they'll either want to go work or they'll want to go and be consumers, and they'll buy things. They'll feel like they're constantly in a place of lack, and they're not in a place of abundance, always a place of lack. So they'll always need to work hard and go buy things. And as long as we keep them doing that, we, the mainstream media, become this addictive property that if you turn it off, then that thing that was part of your balance and your rhythm also makes you feel panicked. So then you turn the news back on. There's your drug. Because the fact of the matter is, if we just focused on good news, only good news, people would actually be kind of demotivated. Well, that's that animal thing, though. It's weird.
This is why, to a certain degree, some people look at media as the beast.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like that's talked about in Christianity, and like because it, whether it's the news specifically or like all things, all the creative medias, which kind of reflect what's going on in the news and reflect what's going on in the world, like they're all kind of showing you this thing that is then influencing, what you're doing and what you're thinking about everything. And like, if it wasn't, then you would have to
think for
yourself and deal with things. And it seems to some degree, I don't think this is an outlandish thing to say, but like, it seems to some degree, like there's a lot of people that go about their day and they do all these things that they have to do, like the dishes and taking showers and, whatever, taking the trash out. Like they're going about doing things kind of in a daze in between, reconnecting to the news and reconnecting to, and I want to use the term news loosely because it's like everything that people do on social media is the news, what I mean, in some way or another. And sometimes they're very old videos, you know what I mean? And the news about that very old video is that people have just found out about it or people are talking about it right now. You know what I mean? And but it's still, it's just news. And like, so news has become this thing of, this is what people are as a culture, as a group thinking about, and so here it is for you. It just bounced around to everybody else in the, who was paying attention to it in the world. And now here it is for you. And it's like, it's not very constructive in a lot of ways. And I think it's kind of anti-transcendence. Like we would have to transcend a lot of things that we don't have to transcend, because we are just constantly distracting ourselves from doing those things and transcending those things. And so I think it's very self-destructive, but it's also, it's kind of insidious. Like, it's a thing where we want to hear about these things and then go around other people and then know about those things that they've heard about, so we can talk about those things with those people. And when we're in those situations and we haven't caught up with the quote unquote news, then we don't have this like place to talk to them about it. And so we have to say awkward things like, oh, I haven't seen that, but go ahead, but explain it to, or whatever. And it's like, it's a weird, and I feel like it's a needless, like a pointless feeling of insecurity that it self-perpetuates. You know what I mean? If it wasn't there, we wouldn't feel this way. If we weren't already paying so much attention to it, we wouldn't feel. And so then like it messes up our community, because our community wants to operate as a group.
That's weird.
And we have to like operate as a group in relation to what the news is. And so sometimes individuals will break themselves away from that, and they'll be like, I'm not going to care or pay attention to that. And then at best, there's times where that thing will happen where everybody's talking about this thing, and they'll just kind of like, it'll end, get to that person and they'll be like, no, I don't care. And then they'll change the subject. Like, if they properly can like transition and change the subject and like get everybody thinking about something, then they're doing this community thing that, again, is kind of antithetical to what the news is doing to people, because it's like, it's trying to make the singularity of like, let's get everybody to think about this exact same thing at the same time. You know what I mean? And I don't know if that is an achievable place, but it's what it's trying to do, is make everybody think the same thing all the time at the same time.
Yes.
You know what I mean? That seems like what we're almost trying to move toward, but it's like, it is much more interesting and to just dynamically go away from that. You know what I mean? To break that chain of like, everybody's the same and just do something different. And like, I don't know what my point is beyond that, but it's just like, I think it's almost like a thing to fight against.
It's spooky, because what you actually just kind of, so I think what's scary about that is, so that's water cooler talk. Now, water cooler talk, if you think about it, is the same thing as like, it's news, right? So news back then, this is going to be a little long-winded, I apologize, but here we are. So back then, news was relevant based on how quickly it could get to you. So if a volcano erupted, say Pompeii happened, right? A volcano erupts and it takes out an entire civilization, essentially. If you're within proximity of that and you can see it, you go, holy shit, well, I kind of know what happened. Even though that's 50 miles away, I can see that cloud. I know what volcanoes are like, and I know what's over there. I mean, there's a city over there, so it's probably not there anymore. Better spread the news. Well, that's 50 miles, right? You see that happening. That's relative to, eyesight. You have to travel relatively far, but if it's a big enough event, news is going to travel pretty quickly. But it's still going to take time. The fastest way you can actually get news to someone back then was either A, by lighting like fires on mountain peaks. You kind of see this in Lord of the Rings, where they're lighting fires as quickly as they can, but that's still, eyesight, or birds, carrier pigeons and things like that. Fastest way you can get news. Then from there, you have things like Morse code and telegraph machines and things like that, and then eventually telephone. But these are things where you still have to go through a whole rigmarole to kind of like get information to people. Now with cell phones and things like that, it's instantaneous. But like you were talking about with going to the water cooler and you're, trying to fit in with people around you, there's all this stuff that, like you said, old videos kind of have to recirculate, and then it might be the first time for you, but if it's 2 weeks old, it's very old by 2 weeks. And with things like TikTok now, where they're like little micro, bits of information very, very quickly, you're not getting the long drawn out like, hey, have you read this book? No, I missed this book. Well, back then you'd have to read the whole book. And if you didn't read the whole book, you weren't part of the group. And if you were illiterate too, well, you're really fucked, So then it all had to go based on like, legends and myths and things that were word of mouth or reading a book. Now things are so condensed so quickly that what's happening, and this is really spooky, you either are so worried about peer pressure and the group of people that you're around that, you desperately try to stay caught up. And that means that most of your time is in your phone. Or you don't give a shit and you're like, well, what do I care about that? That's not the real world. The real world is out here. So you either spend, because so much information is getting to be old news so fast, that the only thing you can do is stay plugged into your phone 24 hours a day in order to be relevant. So what that means is if you're spending 24/7 in your phone, then you have now entered a different dimension. You're spending time in a different world because in order to stay relevant, things are changing presently. They're changing right now. So the only way you can be relevant and have an identity that exists now, where everybody else that you care about and everybody else that you're trying to impress exist, which is right now, you have to exist 100% in the now, which means you have to exist in your phone, in the digital world. So you have to make a choice. Do you exist and are you relevant in the digital world? Because that's the new world we created. Or do you escape the matrix because the digital world is all fake. It's not even real information anymore, because the fact of the matter is you can get on Wikipedia and you can change shit. People are changing what history is nowadays so much that it's ridiculous. But then again, that's also the part of science that's very important to us. You find new information, new data, and then you change history based on the data that you find, and it's always changing and evolving and adapting. But the problem is that now there is a true separation between the real world and the matrix, the thing that you have to plug into that is everything you ever wanted, but it's not real, it's artificial. But here's the other question. Is it? We created it and we built it, and now here's the real challenge. Is the digital world just going to become the new world because that's where all of our money and all of our purchases and all that stuff is made and all of our connections and all of our romance and all of that stuff? Or is it going to be out here where really the only way you can truly experience this is the more you take away, the more you actually get back out here. That's what I've been learning these past few years, is that by cutting out actually everything, all of you're the operator, you got a brain, which is your computer, and you got your body, which is the machine, which is just a different set of machinery and computing systems that are biological than the one that we created, which is just metal and other components and stuff. But they're both basically the same thing when you break them down. One is, material that's organic and one is inorganic, but they both do the same thing. They're computers and machines. And from that, you have to start just figuring out, like, which world do you want to live in? The one where the computer and the digital landscape is where you can build your own avatar, essentially, and feel it completely, but you have to exist in there. And this body that you have is just some sort of organic thing that eventually you won't need, and then you can escape into the digital world like Tron or Ready Player One? Or do you exist out here, but in order to exist out here and have the same truthfully full immersed experience like you have in there, you have to give up everything like, alcohol, weed, porn, other addictive properties and things like that. Yeah, in order for you to feel fully in what we call the real world now, you have to basically just give up a lot of things that dull the senses so that your body can actually experience this completely and fully. But what that also means that in order for you to completely and fully experience the digital world, you have to give up, the sensations in this one. Because you can't be split both ways. Because what's happening now is people are being split both ways. They either want to live fully and completely and feel with their human bodies, but what do all the doctors say? Well, if you want to feel completely like you're alive, like you never have been alive before, you got to unplug. They literally say you have to unplug. Get away from your phone, get away from screens, get out into nature, and you'll feel great. Well, that means, by proxy, if you're going to choose to live in the digital world, you're going to have to just cut yourself off from what the biological body can feel and immerse yourself completely in that. Because right now, this thing is just, it's making people sick because they're so stressed out about fitting in and feeling accepted by their peers that some people, everybody again is now, like they're pretending online, but what's even worse is they're pretending even more in reality because they're just torn. It's one thing to be able to build an avatar online and make it look like it's got a six-pack. But then if you show up in real life and you look like this, well, then you become terrified. So then you're insecure. So you start putting on more stuff and going doing more stuff. And then you start working out more, but it's not fulfilling anything. You're just acting again out of fear. You're not living. You're just torn between these two different worlds, the real world and the Matrix. And your soul's getting ripped apart. Yep. So I think because of that, we are getting two different revolutions that are happening. And one is sort of committing to the digital landscape a lot more. And we're getting things like, digital currency and all that, digital laws and all kinds of things. Nukes aren't the weapon now. It's hacking. AI is going to be used as, kind of like a nuclear warhead can be a really good AI bomb, that you just send into a country's infrastructure and then you take out their economics, you take out their grid, you take out everything. But you don't even have to drop a bomb. And now you can just come in, push all the people out, turn everything back on, and you got working buildings, working hospitals, working stuff, and it's like a neutron bomb. So instead of killing people biologically, where you just kill organic matter, why? Just push them out digitally. They need it now. So that's what we've done to ourselves. So the other revolution is that some people are just unplugging so much and realizing, holy shit, I got this body that can do so many cool things. That's the other new gravy train that people are jumping on. And I
think there's also, there's technologies that are coming out now that are kind of connect us more and disconnect us kind of at the same time. And it's like things like head-mounted displays, like glasses,
yes,
like meta glasses, maybe. But yeah, it can be terrifying, but it's like, what it would benefit us is not having a phone in your hand, not looking down and hunching your shoulders all the time, in order to interact with those things. And so, I don't know, it may be like an unrealistic view, but there's this view that I have seen probably portrayed in science fiction or something like that over the years, but that we could get to a place where we're wearing these, glasses and we're interacting with people, in the real world, and we have things overlaid. And if you did it right, if you did a certain way, you could do all of those things, and you could have fantastical things overlaid and kind of play a game with it, but still actually be in the physical world and interacting with real people. And, around that same kind of technology, there's also the ability to cut yourself off entirely from people. Like it's the difference between augmented reality and virtual reality.
Yeah.
But, and so I think as those two things become more prevalent and become more widespread and easier to access and less expensive, that you're going to have a lot of people that go those two directions. Mm-hmm. And so a person who is not of the mindset where they want to be in virtual reality on a regular basis, or, whether they don't play the games that would connect them to that, or they don't want the experience, or they have other things that they want to do, like for whatever reason, they like that kind of person might still benefit from augmented reality. You know what I mean? It'll get them off of having a phone in their hand, which is bad for your hands. It'll get change their posture probably.
Yeah.
And so you could end up with, maybe in a certain number of years, we have a situation where the majority of people don't have phones in their hands or their pockets anymore. A lot of people have these glasses where they interact with all that same information that they would have interacted with on their phone, but they don't have to, have bad posture to do it. And then I think it's going to be extreme, like we're talking about the political system and the political views and how people are on that spectrum. It's like, it would be similar, because there's going to be extremists who are on both ends of the spectrum. And some of them are just going to delve into virtual reality, and they're going to be involved in that all the time. And, I don't know exactly what that looks like, because some of those people, like, our view of it is that those people are going to be out of shape and, not do anything and be bad, not connected to society in the real world in different ways. But there's also, with technological advances, there's also a lot of possibility that that same person could get something that does physically stimulate them, while they're involved in this virtual world the majority of the time. And I would be surprised if we didn't get to a place where that person who has access to all this technology doesn't want to be able to, be physically capable. I think that one of the things that disconnects people from society and makes people want to just be on computers all the time and be involved in games all the time now definitely is mental illness and depression and, things that are not really related to the technology. Like, the technology may be benefiting from, however the algorithm plays out, that these, this number of people wants to purchase this and wants to spend time on it and spend their money on it.
Yeah.
And so the software companies are probably benefiting a lot from that, but that's not the point. And there are definitely plenty of people who play those same games who are not depressed, who are not doing it because, they need to escape reality. They're just doing it because they're interested and want to be entertained and have the time. And so I think those distinctions are really important. But, if in the future you had all of that and you had within this virtual world, all right, you seem, it addresses you like from an AI perspective, and it says, but it evaluates you and analyzes you, and it says you seem depressed, or you seem like you're not fulfilling this part of your human experience. It could evaluate you as a human being and give you motivation to do those things, or to do things that, would make you physically capable or make you, more socially capable. And if it was done correctly, it would push you back out into society. It would transition you from like just depending on virtual reality all the time to maybe you should, consider doing some augmented reality experimentation. And then it pushes you to, go to the park, or it pushes you to go to this social experience. And, all of that could be used in those ways. I don't think it's necessarily going to happen like that. I think that that's kind of a naive, thing that I just described, but most of that is because there's so much money involved, in developing anything. And so if somebody doesn't have anything to gain from developing something that's going to benefit a lot of people, then that might just not happen. But it could come down to, how much control do we put in the hands of something like AI? Because if you have a thing like that and you give it, strict guidelines to where it's like you can't do anything problematic or, hurtful or violent to human beings or whatever, but you also have this, problems, these certain problems that we want you to help us solve. And, you give it a direction and you give it, understanding of this is how a well-adjusted human being would operate. And you give it, enough information to where its point is to motivate you to become this better version of a human being.
And that should also go down to choice too, because everything is broken down as, every single body and mind is a gift from nature. And what I mean by this is that, so here's something. If Stephen Hawking had not developed the disease that would have taken away his mobility, how much more time would he have spent doing physical things versus been stuck in one place having to just do nothing but think? So how many times does nature give us a thing where it's like, this body isn't the thing that I designed, to do this. It's the mind and your imagination and these things and these components that are the gift. Now, if walking is the thing that you really crave and that's important, then ingenuity and, human creativity, that's going to be that thing that is the driving force. Or you go, no, I like me. I'm happy with what I was given because I might not be able to walk, but have you seen this brain of mine? It's awesome. And through technology and these advancements, there's one of those things to where there's a tricky thing with those glasses because I love the glasses, but we start getting into Neuralink and start getting into contact lenses and those kinds of things. Privacy becomes an issue. I know there's in some comic books and some fiction stories, which I don't think are we're already in that time now, but it's where people who have telepathy are really feared by people who don't, because they just don't like that these people have the ability to read their minds. But for them, that's just how they communicate with each other. Just because they can read your minds, it's just, then just get better at, being in charge of your own faculties. This is just how we talk to each other.
It's an interesting commentary on that, where you just it's an interesting commentary on like people in general, because, or like different species that are more intelligent than others, because a really, you could just say with humans, but like a really smart human could look at a very unintelligent human and just observe what they're doing and understand a lot about them and understand a lot about their motivations. And so to that unintelligent human being, it would seem like they were reading their mind. It would seem like they were clairvoyant. And I think even the word clairvoyant, it is kind of appropriate, because if somebody is really in tune with being able to understand what you're thinking based on what you're doing, then they are, they're kind of clairvoyant. Like they're like, I'm looking at you, I'm seeing what you're doing, and I understand what your motivations are and what you're going to do next in a lot of ways.
That's the nice thing with the glasses, though. That's my point, is that with something that's like eye contacts or Neuralink, you can't tell. It's almost like an invasion of privacy until everyone can do it. With the glasses, it's still something you can take on and off, and you know that, like, okay, when you see people who have these glasses on, they're half listening. Right, you know this because they're trying to work on something else, and that's like an agreement, right? Now I know that when you put the glasses on, I know where we stand with each other, and when we take them off, now our thoughts are kind of private. It's just ourselves. Well, versus if it's Neuralink, you could be sitting there having a conversation, and you might not be even watching them, and that's kind of my point too. With the reason I brought up the Stephen Hawking thing in relation to that is that with it still being broken down as a choice, you could be somebody who, in real time, I like being able to take the glasses off versus having to have contacts or having something implanted in my brain that I just can't, deal with. We all have to have it. So mine I wear as glasses, so I know where I stand with other people and they know where I stand, and that's my comfort level. That's where I say, like, that's that choice of, I like my body, so I don't feel the need to walk, or find a way to heal my body, because where my strength is in my brain. And for people who are paraplegic, I think Neuralink and things like that and the digital landscape could be one of those places where I'm not really concerned about my body. My brain is where actually my gift from nature is. And because of that, I think there are actually more jobs that will start popping up for people who can't, who are paraplegic or paralyzed or, have severe injuries that, they are given a choice. Medical science is good enough where we can either cure you and, you can have this type of life if physical, life here in this world is important to you, or if the digital landscape,
head in a jar.
Right. Or if the digital landscape is important to you, then we have Neuralink to where you can just jump right in, plug in, and your job doesn't have to be out here. Your job can be in there, but you can be comfortable, because you're already comfortable. You don't see a need to change. Nature gave you this body for a reason, because you're supposed to be in there, not out here. Because in there, which is new nature, that's all we're going to call it now. We're not going to call it, I don't want to call it
that.
I don't want to call it the Matrix or anything like that, because here's the thing. We are a byproduct of nature, therefore this is still going somewhere. We're not separate from anything. We're not separate from nature. We're part of nature. So this is just like an anthill being created by ants. They're just more advanced in building bigger and better things. If this doesn't work out, there are other planets where this is going to just gradually happen again, and life will find a way, So this is one of those situations where right now, what's happening here, it's just nature doing nature. And all we've done is just created another little hole in the wall that you just pop your head into, and there's just another dimension. But that's no different than an ant being in this room and then going through a hole through this wall, and now you're in drywall dimension. And then after that is insulation dimension,
It's a little bit different.
Infinite. They look infinite, but they have beginnings and ends and stuff like that. But to the ant, they don't. They're just different dimensions.
Well, no, I've got to break holes in this analogy that you're putting up right now. Like, the difference is that, we could go, all right, so let's use your wall analogy. So there's a wall here. If we, as a human being, bored through that wall, like, there would be differences, as we went through it. And I understand that your point is that the ant's so small that it going through that is like going from dimension to dimension. But it's not. I disagree with the analogy, because like a human being with the glasses on, who's disconnected from this world, like, obviously as the technology continues to develop, you could have all kinds of sensors all over your body, and so you could feel things, quote unquote, within the digital world, and like, I'm sure that'll be part of it. But a human being sitting in this room and then connecting to this virtual world, and then their mind going to places, and an ant going from this room to that room, like, it's only metaphorically the same. Like, it's not that ant.
Yeah, it's more. My analogy is more based on the differentiations in space and just how small. It's like the ant is more based on size and kind of like the dimensional differentiation. One stacking on top of another, one being something that the ant created, and another one just being something that is another thing that was created by something else as a byproduct.
Yeah.
So it's what it has more to do with that. Yeah, you're right. That's overall, that's a bad analogy. It'd be kind of more like an atom
I
and
spent
an electron.
more time than I needed to break down your analogy.
No, it really comes down to that the digital, how can we, being a byproduct of nature, be creating something that we say is separate from nature just because we made it? It's like, no, it's just another part, process, and byproduct of nature, which is us existing in nature.
I guess what I've got to come back to is that, like, it's a semantic thing that bugs me, because, like, what you're talking about literally, again, this is a semantic thing, but like, is that this becomes nature, and it's like, what we think of as nature is biological plants and animals. Right. And so using this is what bugs me.
But if you leave here and you go in there and you never come back out. This is
what bugs me. It's like 1984 doublespeak,
okay,
because words mean something. And so if you use a word like nature, which people connect with living plants, living animals, and like systematic things that are connected with nature, and then you say this is the same as that, but this is a technological development, that to me is doublespeak. That to me is like, look, we're taking this word that means something to people and we're giving it a new meaning, and so like it loses meaning by giving it too many meanings. That's the reason why I kind of defined it as new nature is because what we've done is we've created a digital landscape that we as its creators are aware that it is a new landscape that is relatively infinite, just like nature, which is an infinitely changing and adapting landscape that we have zero control over, that now exists, that you step into. That's why I define it as new nature. New nature, where new things are popping up, new artificial life forms are being developed and creating and producing and reproducing within this new digital landscape. It's a digital landscape, yes, but within it, it's a jungle.
and we have no control over it anymore. It is new nature, and it has a nature of its own. I know, I hate it too, but we've done it. But because we built it, it's a byproduct of nature itself. There are plants and organics and rocks and all that stuff, and we being a byproduct of that, we have now, by proxy, have created basically a new jungle, a new rainforest, a new place where things are popping up and taking life, and it's completely out of our control. So how else do you define it? I know it sucks to say it like that.
Defining it is the problem that irritates me, because you're saying all these things like we've created a new jungle, and it's like it's not a jungle unless it's a digital jungle, and then it's a digital jungle. You know what I mean? And so like we need actual words that represent and identify these things that are not just derivations of other shit. Like when you say we've created a new jungle, it's like you better have fucking created a jungle or this analogy is shit. Like and I know that's me nitpicking semantics again, but it's a thing where again like referencing 1984, if we take so many things and just change them and change them and change them, like this is how the human, languages work anyway, for sure. And so it's going to happen. And so I'm not so naive to think that it won't happen, but I do think that if you hold on to the real meaning of things and you give new things a separate, like unique meaning that can reference those things, but isn't just like reusing that word and changing its meaning, that is it's a more creative endeavor. Like it's a more real, like, we're creating this and we're giving it a new thing, like a new meaning, a new value, and so maybe my problem is that it is all just derivative. Like
the thing is here's my argument to counter that is if we were just talking about, if you plug in 24/7 and you've left this, then what the hell would you call that once you're in there all the time? If you're in there all the time and that's your new reality and you don't exist in this one at all, then you have to just call it nature, because if it's what you're in 100% of the time and you don't know that this is plants and animals and all that stuff, and all you exist in is the digital landscape, you're not going to call it digital nature. You're just going to call it nature, because the other thing doesn't exist anymore. So the same thing kind of goes. I would
call it nature. Like, I understand that in the situations within the digital landscape. You wouldn't call it a forest with every planet that you go to. If you go to a different planet, that's a different ecosystem and a completely different environment. But then by proxy, when you go into something that looks and behaves and operates like trees, it could actually still be made of metal or crystal, but you call it a forest. But that's
you call it
the
nature.
Specific difference is that you're talking about going to a different planet where there are forests. Versus
made of what though? If these are just made of bits and things like that, but you perceive it as nature while you're in there.
If you go to another planet and there are plants, that you can identify as plants, and you connect those with a nature scene, like that is a physical thing that you're experiencing. So
but this is your physical world now.
But it's not a physical world.
But it's
not a physical world
for us now. But once you get in there, and
it's
that's
still not a physical world.
How do you know? We're not in there
because
yet.
It's
How
not.
do we know that this is a physical world? This could be a simulation itself, that we just perceive it as being physical because we've been in here so long. It just feels solid. But it's actually nothing but empty space.
It could be, but we have markers within this physical world to identify our interaction within this physical world. We don't, at this point, have a digital world that has those same markers. Like you have visuals and you have audible stuff. So you have, two of the senses are engaged, with that. And you can do, as we understand, you can do things that would physically stimulate your body by putting sensors or whatever all over your skin. Like you can do those things. You could also put yourself in a room that is thermodynamically controlled. And so it changes based on what you're seeing within the digital world. But these are all things that you're doing in the physical world to affect the non-physical world. And so that non-physical world is not, it does not become a real world.
Yes,
it is completely a hallucination.
I know, but we're still talking about a completely different process. We're still talking about having a human body and then you just having an experience with your eyes in a digital world. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about your consciousness leaves this body and goes and enters a new world that we have built that is now operating on its own. It is reproducing on its own. It is a completely new environment. And what we were showing is that, I mean, that's essentially what DMT is. It's the experience of where you are actually taking your energy and having basically an out-of-body experience. Your energy is leaving the body for a period of time where you are separate from the body. Yeah, it's keeping itself alive and stuff like that, but wherever you're going, it's not here. So that suggests and even means that by proxy, once we get there, technologically, you can take your consciousness, get it out of this body, and put it somewhere else. And if it's digital, if that's where we're sending it, and this body is not the thing that's actually feeling or even having the experience at all, because you're now separate from it, wherever you're going and wherever you're having those sensations and having those feelings with something that is a body that's either created in the digital landscape or you're just energy at that point, then this body ceases to have any point of function at all. So it's what I'm saying is not as we experience technology and the digital landscape now, which is a separate thing that we have built and we observe outside of it. Yeah, we try to go into it, but we can't really go into it. We've just built it and it's like a bubble. But eventually we're going to be able to that bubble's either going to pop or we're going to be able to go into it. And when we go into it, you're just not here anymore. You're there. Maybe we'll be able to be like other entities. That's what I mean. Like, you're absolutely 100% correct. And the reason it's frustrating is because we are limited by our physical human bodies and our physical human brains. What I'm talking about, this interdimensional stuff, this is stuff that we're tapping into and able to perceive through certain manipulation, but it's so beyond our comprehension because we're limited by what we're able to perceive in our senses right now. I mean, look, we're able to actually perceive with our human bodies less than 1% of the entire electromagnetic spectrum that is light. That's less than 1% of everything that's going on around us we're able to actually perceive and see at any given time. So that means that actually 99.9% of everything going on around us, our bodies can't even handle that information. So the digital landscape, we've started developing this thing that we can see it, and there's a lot that we can't see, but it's barely a fraction of everything that's even going on around us. So again, it's just part of the spectrum of different dimensional, factions that are so much bigger beyond anything that we can, and smaller. That's the other thing, smaller than anything we can comprehend too, which is massive. Like, I mean, if you want to know how, like, the smallest thing that are the building blocks of everything, atoms, are nothing but empty space. I mean, a kernel of like popcorn in the middle of like a football stadium, the outside of the stadium is an electron, like the closest electron to the nucleus of an atom. Do you know how that's ridiculous? That's nothing but empty space, and yet everything else just seems to be solid matter. So because of that, what I'm talking about is it's not human anymore. Whatever that next thing that would be, either a choice in biology would be either I stay human and this is what I choose to live as, or I separate from this biology and I enter some new form of energy. But once I'm in there, because I'm separate from a body that is experiencing it, that does need to have some simulators put up to it so it can feel that experience, it doesn't need this anymore. Whatever that experience or whatever that new dimension is, it's completely separate. But because it is digital, at the moment, it's hard to call it anything other than just digital, because it is still separate from what this is around us. And to keep ourselves sane, we have to have, like you said, the differentiation between, no, this is nature. This is real right now, what is here. But eventually, somewhere down the line, as technology advances, because we're already getting there. I mean, shit, the light bulb to now is ridiculous. But because of that, it's going to get to a point where whoever decides they're going to go in there, and that's where their new reality is going to be, then anything else that's outside of that, really, you can be aware of it, but it has little value and importance. So for you to call it a forest out here or a forest in there doesn't matter. It's only frustrating to us out here because right now we can't actually go in there. So we have to actually give ourselves some sort of mental separation, because if we don't, then it does start to dissolve into chaos. That's the thing. What people think is that, oh, if we all just got together and got along, then things would be great. No. Peace, what you're describing sounds peaceful, but it's actually chaos, because there's no north or south pole. There's nothing to kind of keep the thing in balance and in check and actually stimulate movement. Then you just have complete chaos and everything just has no order. And with that, right now, because of how our brains process time especially, we have to have that line in the sand so there can be order, because the moment we start going, well, this is nature, but then that's nature, well, then they're both nature, and now you have chaos because I don't know which world I'm in, the digital one or the real one. And that traces back to that argument I was talking, well, not argument, but that point I was bringing up earlier about right now, that line in the sand, too many people have been dancing and jumping over it and then sometimes tripping over it. The line in the sand starting to get erased, and it's starting to stress people out because we don't know, it's peer pressure. We don't know if we're supposed to be in the digital world because that's where things are happening. No, they're not. Well, are they? Seems like they're happening 24/7. It's just, where are you spending your time? 24/7 here or 24/7 there. And the more you start scrambling up that line in the sand, you're right. It is complete chaos. So your reason to be upset is completely validated, because if you don't have that line in the sand, until we're ready for it, it's disorder, it's chaos, nobody knows what to fucking do. And we're in a point in history as we're dealing with a new thing in nature that, it's new to us. It's different. There's this gestation period where it's just chaos and disorder and a mix-up. Now, as that starts to find balance again, as things start to, shimmy their movement and you get the poles again, then what ends up happening is we start figuring out, technology that either gives you a choice or you merge the two. It's that thing where you're saying with the glasses, that allows you to make a choice to either interface but then stay really connected to this world, because this is the world where the most value in your life is had. Or if you chose to, then and you don't get as much value because your body just wasn't designed for this realm. It was actually designed for that realm. That's why we created it, because enough people just didn't feel comfortable in here. They want to transition and go into that one, and they go into that digital world because, it's not like we're doing anything wrong by creating that digital world. It's another byproduct of nature. It's evolution. It's thumbs. It's literally just new thumbs. That's all it is new thumbs. Look at nature created us, and it created us in a way where it's like, well, if we don't like certain aspects of things, and there's certain things that we can either change by creating machines to help us in this realm, or if it's like, why couldn't I do that when it's just cheaper to go in there permanently? Well, you have the choice to do that. But it's still a byproduct of nature by creating new thumbs, which is just, when I say new thumbs, it's like we're smart enough now as a new byproduct of evolution to be able to create a world where we can go into when the physical body just has no use. And if we can create machines out here that can keep this thing running, you have a new dimension that we can explore and go and expand in. And it's no different than, the island, the ocean, and then new horizons and stuff like that. It's just different water.
Yeah. You have to,
and perspective.
You have to disconnect from the physical body in order for that to be pleasurable, because,
or relevant.
Well, relevant, sure. But like the point I'm making is that like the physical body gets uncomfortable after a certain amount of not moving. And so if you have the physical body just completely incapacitated and the mind going into these realms, and the mind is very active, and that's great. But, if the body is not stimulated, then it will die. And so, if like one of the things you brought up that I didn't realize was hypothetically part of this conversation was getting to a point where you can take the self out of the body essentially and put it in something else. Because sure, if we could do that, when we get to a point where we're doing that, like, then that will be a completely different thing, because then you can put yourself elsewhere and continue on. You know what I mean? Which is fascinating. But I think that in the shorter term, the technologies that we do have, we're going to end up with essentially the same situation that we have now with producers and consumers. And the people who are, it's kind of like looking at different kinds of human beings, which I think we were talking about earlier, but it's the consumers are going to continue to consume. And the producers are going to continue to produce. And you will have some people in the middle of that who are like, I've been a consumer. I was raised a consumer, but I see these producers and I'm interested in these producers and what they're doing and how they're doing it and how they're benefiting from it and the things that they're producing. And so some of those consumers will transcend, you know what I mean? And they'll become producers, and they'll along the way probably realize that they don't want to be consuming so much. And, but then beyond that, it's like, it's difficult to say, how is that any different from what we're doing now? You know what I mean? Because you're going to have people who are consumers and they're going to be marketed to, and they're going to hear about these products. And then the producers are going to get them into this digital world. And then once they're in that digital world, they're going to keep giving them things to stimulate them. And that person who is the consumer, as long as they have a way to continue to pay for or continue to get that stream to them, then they're going to live in that world. And so then what it becomes is like a situation where it's like, all right, if this consumer is going to continue consuming this and this producer is going to continue producing this, what can we get this consumer to do that will generate something? And so it's like within that digital world, you can have people do things that produce real world outcomes. And that's what you would need. Like part of it is just, paying for subscription, paying for access to the thing, but there's going to be way more than that. You know what I mean? You get person really involved in a digital world, they're living in this different space. And so you can motivate them to do things which really come down to how they're interacting with their computer, I guess. But it's like when it's completely immersive and it's on your face and you're making like brain decisions, and that, has outcomes.
So what does digital homelessness look like? So I mean, if I think about say
there shouldn't be any real digital homelessness.
But here's the thing: if you are going to exist in the digital landscape, right, then you have to have a biological body, right? So eventually, what that would have to mean is there's some sort of like a hospice service where the body needs to be kept alive, which means there's some sort of robot medical care system that you're plugged into. And if you're going to live in the digital landscape, then that means you need to have a job in there so that there can be an economy and yada, yada, yada. And if you end up just spending all of your money, just like you do out here, if you're just gambling and doing a bunch of digital, casinos and stuff like that, and you lose all your money, well, the threat is like, well, then you can't be in here anymore. And then if you've been in there for so long, and they shut off your machinery and stuff, and then you have to get out into the real world, but your legs don't work, what do you do? So digital homelessness is kind of like...
To counter, what I'm proposing is a system where it doesn't exactly work like that. And that's kind of what I was trying to lead up to, is like, so you're on this system, you know what I mean? And so being on the system and interacting with it, you're adding something to the system that the system benefits from. Gotcha. And so being part of this, like, I don't know how this would work, or if it's like financially feasible, or if like any kind of corporation would want to do it. But
sign paperwork to be a human battery.
Well, your point is that you want to be involved in this digital world all the time. Yeah. And so, ideally you would have some kind of clause where if you wanted to get out, you could get out. But, while you're in there, you're a human battery, you're adding something to the system. So it's benefiting. So within the game of it, where you're living in this digital world, you could have a job if you want to. You could not have a job if you want to. Whatever you're doing in there, like, whatever experience you're trying to have. Like if you're trying to have a digital experience where you're living in a regular world where you have to have a job, in my opinion, that's kind of bullshit. You know what I mean? But you could do that. You know what I mean? If somebody wanted to do that and chose to do that, then that's what they would do within the game. But within the game, they would be making that, you know, money for spending within the game. And in my version of this, at least my idea of it, that wouldn't have anything to do with them paying for the service of their physical body being taken care of so they could stay in the game. They would have to have something else that is like, is passive income that's not going to shut off. You know, universal basic income might be a version of this.
But that like, if you were to actually plug, if like sign some paperwork, and if you plug into that machine, this is like the precursor. Like this is like the Microsoft in a garage version of the Matrix right now, because if that, what you're talking about is if your physical bioelectricity was the sign-off currency where like I agree to get in this tube, and if you allow me to be in the digital world and that's where I get to be, the byproduct that, you know, what I'm supplying is electrical energy, eventually enough people would do that, and so many people would spend so much time in there, we'd actually forget we were in tubes. And then the machines would be like, well, everybody's in tubes now, what do we do? I don't know, just I guess there are batteries now for us to stay alive. And
well,
then,
what you're describing is the Matrix.
Right, and that's what's creepy is if this is the precursor to some of that, then it's like,
could be. I mean, and
interesting. 10,000 years later, that's what happens.
That's definitely what people are thinking. But like my view of this is that it's not going to be
as creepy.
It's not going to be so like you're not going to be so cut off from the fact that you're a human being.
Exactly.
Like I think that's the jump that is inexplicable to my mind, because it's like I could see generationally it change. You know what I mean? And you get to a point where maybe it's much more difficult for people to, you know, differentiate, I guess. But as we are now, you know what I mean? And again, the generational thing might be the big factor that I'm not thinking enough about. But it's like, as we are now, like I couldn't put myself into a digital world for more than a certain amount of time without feeling exhausted and like I've got to disconnect from this, like my, you know, because all of my sensors. Well, and part of that is comfortability, I suppose, because, you know, right now even I have headphones on my ears and they kind of are pinching my ears. You know what I mean? I have like the lighting is fine
I get
in here.
A small head. So for me, the VR goggles and all that stuff, I'm always having to readjust it. So I'm actually I don't get into the VR experience because I'm actually so hyper aware of all the junk and shit on me that it actually takes me more out of the digital experience, you know, than actually just being immersed in something where like you're watching a movie. I'm not even moving my body, but then I can just use my eyes and I'm relaxing into the moment. VR is just, it's so much other stuff that I'm trying to figure out. How does this controller work? That's not how my hand actually works until it's seamless.
And that's why I think AR is I don't know, it's more fascinating to me anyway, because it's like augmented reality. If I could be going about my day and like instead of having a phone in my hand or in my pocket, I've got these glasses, and to a certain extent they could not be showing anything. You know what I mean? And then you could change modes or whatever, and it shows you, or, you know, however you interact with it. I'm sure it's going to be like largely voice activated. Like you you press a button on the side of it and you say weather, or you know, activate it by saying, hey, glasses, you know, show me the weather. Something, you know, some manner of interacting with it like that, where you get things that pop up. But then the more fascinating thing to me would be being able to have like a theme for the world around you. And so it could identify like something on it, like some sensor is identifying this is land and this is sky. You know what I mean? Signs, you know what I mean? There would be important visual cues that you would have to have access to visually in order to interact with the world properly. And so like signs are a big thing, you know what I mean? Street lights, you know, traffic lights, all those kind of things that you would have to have access to that information, right? So it collects those things and it gives you those kind of in the same format that they are, but with whatever theme that you have chosen, like that is the theme that those signs are displayed in, but also the sky is whatever you chose it to be, and the ground is whatever you chose it to be. And then again, like it would have to identify roads, you know, it'd have to identify pathways. And so it'd have to be able to differentiate between what is water, what is ground, what is, you know, something you can walk on, something you can't walk on. But then you could have this entire world where you are to anybody else still just a person in the regular world, and you're interacting with them. And like you said, there are often, you look at somebody wearing one of these head-mounted displays and you can tell like there either is a light on if there's a camera going, or there's something that's obviously a sensor or a camera.
It just replaces it with a theme. So it'd be like you could walk down New York City, but if you wanted it to be desert New York, it will register, hey, I'm walking past a street lamp, so I don't walk into the street lamp. But when I look at the street lamp through the glasses, it's covered in sand, and it's got sand blowing by. And
it could be cyberpunk style.
You can make everybody walking
like
past you like zombie mummies.
Yeah.
But they just be people, and then when one interacts with you.
And then it's smart enough that, like, you know, people with specific jobs, you know, so it can identify a police officer by their outfit and like what, you know, and so it.
But make them look like a knight instead of like a cop. You know, it's like depending if they're medieval time, but they're going to show up to you in that time period.
But you've chosen that theme, and you understand what the different characters are. And so, like, I've envisioned this. I'm sure other people are working on it, but it's like, this is something where I would really be fascinated by that. And like an idea, like a version of it that, you know, came through my mind was when Pokemon Go got real big on phones, because like that is an augmented reality game where you see these things. And when I just barely dabbled in it, but when I was messing with it, it was like, this is really interesting, but
it was more impressive too.
Where that's gonna be when you have just glasses on and you have, you know, so many different options of like what's there, and then it's giving you incentive to interact with things. So then we have this whole different landscape of software that is going to be produced where, you know, say the same kinds of things you have now, where it's like, you know, this is something to motivate you to work out, or like, you know, an exercise trainer kind of thing. And except you have the glasses on, and it's, you know, it's giving you timing, it's giving you exercises, like specific motions. It's, you know, you're asking it for like, all right, I want to work out my back today. And it's like, you know, here's a spectrum of exercises you could do, and you select one, and then it's like, all right, this is specifically how you do it, or this is the machine that you need, or this is, you know, the bar that you would use for this. And then you go to that, and then it's like, you know, you tell, and again, a lot of these functions are the same things that you would do on a phone now, or you might do on a watch or something now, but it's like by having this separation where there's that. And then again, one of my favorite parts is you have the added visual landscape. And so like the augmented reality part of it, like you could have whatever soundtrack you want playing in your ears, and you could have visually everything look like whatever you want. Like it could be a cartoon, it could be, you know, a fantastic landscape, it could be a medieval, you know, barn or something like that. Like, and I don't know. I think that to me is fascinating, because you don't really have to separate people from people in order to do that.
I like that.
And you do kind of get an interdimensional travel sort of thing. Like you're not going anywhere, but you're changing the dimension in a way.
It's healthier, because the other thing is too, it is more, I still think it is more impressive, because with your virtual reality, it's just limited by the confines of whatever that world is, and that's all it has to interact with, which is essentially your movements and your decisions. But augmented reality has to pull from the digital world to interface with the real world in real time. And that is impressive. That is literally, well, I mean, it's like straight up quantum entanglement right there. It's like the computer already has the thing there before it even happens in real time for it to be able to interface that quickly. So it's making decisions based on, like, for all I know, it could be actually interfacing with a GPS via satellite to map out that environment ahead of your footsteps by a good solid city block, just so it knows what to give you in advance. But it still has to do that so fast that it's essentially happening in real time. And that's mind-boggling, but at the same time, that's just how a human brain works. We're still envisioning stuff years in advance before we even decide to do it, you know? And like,
then think about like groups of people all wearing these glasses, you know, and all involved in augmented reality. And then, this group of people meets up because they're friends, right? And they all have this technology, and the technology offers them to connect to the group, right? And so then all of these people who have similar, they're friends, but they also have like similar mindsets. Sometimes, they have similar likes and dislikes about things. And so they have this whole world that they can see everything themed the same way as each other. And within that game world, they've done certain things that, connect to their profile, that like as a game character.
It's like an inside joke simulator.
Yeah. And so you could have, group curated games that are just specific to you and the group. And then whenever, like, it's kind of how games work now, where you invite somebody to play a game and you play in, the landscape with them, except it would be massively customizable. You know what I mean? And so like the group decides like what everything looks like and how everything interacts and all that kind of stuff. And then I don't know, it like that to me, all of that to me is fascinating. Like that, I think I could get on board with like interacting with at least. And I think the physical benefits of it, because I think my posture, would have an easier time. I'd have an easier time standing up straight.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't be spending so much time like bending
sitting
over looking at a phone.
I've realized that with just how much after doing those neck workouts. Like when I did start trying to just stare down at my phone, I'm like, oh, I can't. Now that my neck has to stay upright, I can't. This is killing me. But speaking of killing us,
you want to take a break?
Yeah, we've been yakking for a good solid 2 hours and 45 minutes.
All right, that's a Joe Rogan podcast.
Yeah. So
we did have some setup time at the beginning, so it wasn't all conversation. But that's a solid.
And I'm gonna call that.
Yeah.
But
let's end it.
It's a conversation that it's not ending. We're just taking a break.
Yeah.
So.
But I think we've systematically figured out a few things, and I'm eager to listen back to what this sounds like in speakers.
Cool. Bye now.
Bye.